Welcome to the Observe Day podcast, the show where we celebrate the days that matter. From holidays to meaningful observances, we bring you inspiring conversations, stories, and ideas to make each day count. Whether it's raising awareness, learning something new, or simply sparking joy, this is your space to explore the calendar in a whole new way. I'm your host, Wisdom Okonkwo, and I'm excited to share today's observance with you. Let's dive in. Today on Observe Day, we are celebrating National Reading New Book Month with a guest whose story feels like a book in itself, full of battles, breakthroughs, and revelations. David Richards is a former Marine Corps officer turned corporate leader and executive coach who has helped leaders at companies like Cisco, Fidelity, and Microsoft master presence and purpose. But beyond the boardroom, David is a number one international best-selling author whose mission is to help people awaken their divine identity and step boldly into their calling. His unique blend of biblical insights, leadership lessons, and neuroscience makes his voice one worth listening to. And today, we'll talk about how books, both ancient and new, can transform the way we see ourselves and live our lives. Welcome to the podcast, David.
Wisdom, thank you so much for having me on. It's a pleasure to speak with you.
Yeah, okay. David, since this is National Read a New Book Month, I have to start with this. What's a book you've read recently that deeply impacted you and why?
My gosh, where to begin? I just finished reading. I've gone through so many books lately. I just finished reading. Actually, I'll say this: I'm reading right now "Unreasonable Hospitality," and
Okay.
the author is a restaurateur in New York City, and he talks about how when you make beautiful experiences for your customers or clients, that they'll never forget that. And that in and of itself is a hugely transformational way to change someone's life, because people won't necessarily remember what you said to them, but they'll always remember how you made them feel. I've listened to about 3 hours of the book so far, and I really love the approach. I'm not in the restaurant business, but his message is universal in
Yeah.
if you give someone an unforgettable experience, that's worth everything.
Yeah. You've written best-selling books yourselves. What role did reading play in your own transformation from the Marines to the corporate world and then into faith and authorship?
It's a great question, because in the Marines, there were things that you were required to read because they
Okay.
wanted you to understand history, and especially depending what your rank was, there were certain books that they wanted you to focus on. And if you were a younger officer, they would have very tactical books. And then as you got up through ranks, they started wanting you to think more strategically.
Yeah.
When I got out, and I didn't do a great job. I wasn't a avid reader while I was in the military. It just wasn't part of my DNA. And then when I got out into corporate, it really didn't change, honestly. There were still some books, but now it was different because obviously I wasn't reading about military history.
Yeah.
Now I was reading books about how to make teams better. It wasn't really until 2017, 2018 when I really started to pick up reading, because what I discovered was a book is someone else's mind poured out to you on paper, or if you listen on your phone, But when you start to understand how people think, how different people think, and the message they have to share, it opens you up to just understand how powerful books are. Because, I mean, just this year, I've probably read 40 books. And it's just part of my daily practice. I take at least 30 minutes a day to listen to, I mostly listen, but I listen to someone else's thoughts and ideas about a particular subject so I can learn and deepen my own understanding. And how that opened me up as a writer was it helps you understand how to write more effectively, because sometimes if you're not familiar with the act of writing, it can feel very foreign, and you don't want it to feel foreign. And some people are really good. Some people, in fact, when they write a book, they actually record it. So they'll take their microphone and they'll talk through it, and then they'll put what they've talked through, they'll transcribe it, and that becomes their book.
Yeah. Oh. Wow. It's such an exciting experience. For me, it's the fact that in the military you didn't really. I like that you're honest about it. You weren't quite necessarily an avid reader, but when you moved away from there, what happened? Was it the goal that changed, or what changed?
Well, one thing so as I got higher up in my career in the military, I was selected to go to two master's degree programs, and they both had a fair amount of reading to them. But the second one, the first class we took, it was a year-long program, And the first class was a speed reading course.
Yeah.
And this class, the whole class was set up very differently because we would have lecture from 8 to 12 on a Monday, and then we wouldn't meet again until Wednesday morning. But between Monday afternoon and Wednesday morning, we would have to read a full book on Napoleon, like a 300-page book on Napoleon's battles.
Yeah.
And there was no getting around that. So you had to do the speed reading. And I think for me, when I took that course and we read, just in that year, we probably read 40 or 50 books because, I mean, you just learn to speed read and it becomes second nature to you. It also opens you up to, you start to understand history in a much more intimate way because you see, especially in the military, you see the evolution of warfare. You see the evolution of how nations rose and fell. And so that kind of fueled my curiosity. When I got out in civilian life, it was such a big transition that reading just wasn't a priority because like you're trying to learn. I mean, I grew up in the military and then I served in the military. And then you get out and you realize the military is such a small part of life compared to the
What's out there?
95%. Yeah. And so there was a huge shift that took place. And as I so I didn't read, I maybe 2 or 3 books a year, just to kind of understand corporate and how they looked at things and all the different models for doing stuff. But really what shifted was when I started writing, when I first wrote my first book, then something shifted because I knew if I could start reading other people's ideas and thoughts, it was going to inform my own ability to write more effectively.
Yeah. Yeah. I think part of the thing is um, when you start playing a particular game, what happens is for some reason you just become obsessed about the art and craft of it, and so
Sure.
you're like, oh yeah, you start noticing, especially when you're an author, you start noticing books. They put in a particular paragraph, and like, oh yeah, I like the way they phrased it. That's nice. I love what they did there. Prior to that, I'm like, nah, that doesn't really concern me.
It's so true. It's so true because, and you really, I don't remember the name of the book. There was a woman's book I read, and I realized as I was listening to it, I'm like, oh, this is how she thinks. Like this is how this person thinks, and that was a huge shift because that's when I really realized a book, whatever book it is, take your pick, but it's still someone's mind put into structure. Even if you think like one of my favorite authors was Stephen King when I was younger because I loved his horror stories. That's still something that he created in his mind and then poured out onto paper. And when you appreciate that's what a book is, it's someone's mind poured out onto paper, it transforms your appreciation for the craft.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for that.
Sure.
In your upcoming book, you reveal that King David does not ascend to heaven, a
Right.
plot twist many overlook. Why is that discovery so important, and how do you hope it changes the way people read scripture?
Yeah. So there's a really beautiful relationship promised to King David when he's king. And it's that he'll inherit an everlasting kingdom, and it's one that his offspring, Jesus Christ, is going to set up. And then David breaks this covenant because he sleeps with someone's wife and he has the husband killed. And you realize, well, that's a pretty big deal. And then when you start to read into his Psalms.
Before we dive deeper, I'd love to invite you to join the Observe Day newsletter. Every week, I send you highlights of upcoming observances, creative ways to celebrate, and behind-the-scenes extras from the shows. It's the perfect way to stay inspired and never miss a meaningful moment. Sign up today at observeday.com/join. That is observeday.com/join. Now, let's get back to the conversation.
He talks a lot about, multiple times, he talks about being saved from the pit. And what you start to realize is what I discovered when I read it, because a lot of his Psalms, what makes his Psalms different, say from other prophecies or prophets like Isaiah or Ezekiel or someone, is David's Psalms talk about Jesus's suffering on the cross, but in the first person. And so it's almost like Jesus is speaking through David.
Yeah.
So then when you realize, well, David talks about being saved from the pit, that's because in order for Jesus to be the Messiah, there has to be someone who dwells in the bottom of the pit. And since David broke the covenant made to him, the promise of an everlasting kingdom, you realized for Jesus to establish the kingdom, he has to kind of account for David's transgressions. And so the idea is David, what I've really come to appreciate, not only as I've written a book, but as I've built courses around the book, is David's story is the archetype for humanity's salvation, because when David David knows that the promise made to him is made to a human, and yet
Yeah.
it's very clearly stated in the Bible he doesn't ascend to heaven. And so you say, okay, well, I know from my own education that the idea of the son saving the father is a common storytelling
Yeah.
action, right? So if you
Yeah.
think of Luke Skywalker saving Darth Vader, right? If you think of the Odyssey,
Yeah.
Odysseus's son
Yeah.
Telemachus saves Odysseus. There's Pinocchio saves his father Geppetto. So there's this
Yeah.
common thrown. And so my thought was, well, if and the other piece to answer your question is I think most of us, especially in the West, grew up with the idea that we die and then go to heaven, that we escape this place. And
Yeah.
yet I've read N.T. Wright is a brilliant bishop in the UK, and he's written probably 20 books. And one of the common observations he makes in his books is that's not how the Bible ends. The Bible doesn't end with all of us going to heaven. The Bible ends with God coming to earth. And Jesus's story is he is the firstborn of the new creation. And so the idea is we are meant to follow in Jesus's footsteps so that we too can know that he has overcome death. And I looked at, in this book, I look at, well, what are the consequences of David's fall? And how would Jesus go about restoring his father, King David? Because that is this father-son relationship that's set up in the New Testament. There are 18 references to Jesus as the son of David. And I said, well, if that's the story for David, then that must be humanity's story too. And so whatever David needs to believe about Jesus is what I think we all need to believe about Jesus.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much
Sure.
uh, for just taking that time to break that down. You There's one thing you talk about, and that's awakening our divine identity. For listeners who may be exploring spirituality for the first time, what does that really mean?
So again, in the West, a lot of people have grown up with the idea, I grew up with the idea that God is outside of me, right? That was just how I went to church pretty regularly in my youth. And there's this idea that God's outside. And it's also that kind of God is in history, right? Like, because we only have the source material. And if you really understand Jesus's message, God isn't out. God is inside. Like that's what makes it much more intimidating a journey is
Yeah.
how do I deal with the psychology of me knowing that I am a divine part of Christ's mission? And when you start to go introspectively, it opens up the doors of possibilities so much more dramatically, because then it is, instead of looking for something outside of us to save us, we realize the kingdom of God is within us. I mean, that's what Jesus says.
Yeah.
And it's how do you create or restore that kingdom within you? And once you go on that journey, then you start to say, well, if it's true for me, it's got to be true for everyone. It doesn't matter their cultural background, their ethnic background, their religious beliefs, because what makes the story of Jesus so hard to believe is exactly what you need to turn into. Like the idea that, and I had a discussion with someone about this earlier today, is when you put yourself, Jesus says, pick up your cross and follow him.
Yeah.
And when you start to do that, you stop thinking about the religions and there are 45,000 denominations of Christianity. None of that existed when Jesus was around. This was a person who was on a mission to fulfill the covenant of King David, in effect, and save everyone. And the idea that an omnipotent God somehow creates a soul that it knows is going to suffer for eternity just doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
So it's much more an introspective journey than it is an external one. And that's the message. When I say divine identity, it's the idea that if you can truly accept Jesus' teachings as having precedence above everything else that's written in the Bible, then you start to see he does clearly spell out kind of what a path towards ascendance is, whether it's Jacob's ladder or whatever you want to call it. But there is a structure to it, and that is necessary for us to undergo the physical transformation of being saved.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Reading can sometimes be just information, but you emphasize embodiment. How can
Yes.
people take the words they read, especially spiritual text, and actually live them out daily?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we know that, let's say, do you play any sports?
Uh, yeah, nah, not really. But you could give it, use an example of maybe soccer, football, but I don't play that much.
Okay, so but maybe when you were younger, you played soccer.
Yeah, I did,
Okay,
but not now.
and when you first started playing soccer, were you very good?
No,
No,
not
but you
really.
practiced. What happened? You practiced and you got better.
Yeah,
Why did you get better? You got better because you developed the hand-eye coordination to move
the
effectively with
ball.
the
Yeah,
ball. You got better with ball skills with your feet. So you developed in your nervous system, you developed the skills to become more adept at playing soccer.
yeah,
Faith is the same way. And the idea that and I like, this is the conversation I had with my coach earlier today too. I said, what is more likely, that we die and wake up in heaven and we have an understanding of everlasting life and there's God and it's, oh my gosh, God, it's so great to see you. I know Jesus was supposed to conquer death and I'm sorry that I had to die to realize that, but I'm here now. This is great. Does that make sense? Or is it, I get to consciously comprehend Jesus's victory over the cross in accepting salvation consciously so that I can really truly appreciate the magnitude of what he's done? Well, how do you do that? One of the big things that has literally changed my life is incantations. And incantations are where you say power statements or affirmations, but you say them with emotion. And there is so much emphasis in the Bible on I am, right? So Yahweh tells Moses, go tell the Israelites, I am has sent me to you. Jesus says, before Abraham was, I am.
yeah,
So there's this idea that I am is a pretty important statement. So if you say something like, I am, I just did this earlier tonight. So my thought process is, if you say what Jesus said, that puts you in touch with Jesus's consciousness. So if you say, I am the way, the truth, and the life, that's a really powerful incantation because it is you embodying his consciousness to help you transform. And if you do that over and over again, what ends up happening is your nervous system will change so that you are embodying that level of faith. Because the idea for me, wisdom, the idea that, and this has been a 5-year journey to really kind of get to this point, but the idea that if Christ has conquered death, then I should be able to consciously recognize that. And not only consciously recognize it, I get to convince myself that that's already happened. I get to internally have that level of conviction. The only way that I've found really successfully to do that is through the power of incantations.
Yeah. Wow. Many listeners, they pick up books hoping to change their lives, but they often put them down unchanged. I can they approach a new book, whether it's spiritual, personal growth, or even fiction, in a way that leads to real transformation?
Sure. That's a great question. There are 3 levels to mastering anything. And we just talked a little bit about it with incantations, right?
Yeah.
So there's intellectual mastery, and that's where you cognitively understand something. So if I say, let's say you and I go and we meet in New York City, and I say, let's go climb the top of the Empire State Building. It's going to take us 45 minutes to get to the top. And you say, okay, let's do it. Well, you and I both have an intellectual understanding of what I just said. We know it's going to take 45 minutes to climb all the stairs to get to the top of the building.
Yeah.
So that's intellectual mastery. That's the first level. The second level is emotional mastery. So now let's say you and I climb the top of the Empire State Building and we're sweating and our legs are on fire because of all the stairs and our lungs are burning because we just keep going up and up and up. Now we have a consequential understanding of what it means to climb to the top of the Empire State Building because we've done it once.
Yeah.
That's the second level, intellectual mastery. The third level is physical mastery. So now let's say we've climbed the Empire State Building 30 days in a row. On the 30th day, our legs are big and strong, our lungs are used to it, and we do it like that because we've mastered it physically. When you learn something from a book, if you intellectually understand it, as you know it, but you don't embody it, you have to get it into your body. And that's going through intellectual mastery to emotional mastery to physical mastery. And that's why if you want to really make a change in your life, you have to embody that change. It's not just enough to say, oh, this book taught me how to lose weight. That's fantastic. I've read it. Now I know it. No, you have to embody it so that I know how to lose weight now. Like it's in my DNA. This is who I am anymore. So it's much more a physical transformation through changing your nervous system.
Yeah, one of the quotes of Jim Rohn I remember is, "Don't let your learning lead to knowledge. If it does, you become a fool. So let your learning lead to action." I love persons, we see them, they read books on leadership, they read books on money, finance, and basically their reading just leads to knowledge, no action, nothing. And then you're wondering why someone who is reading a book on how to become a millionaire is broke.
Right. It's very true. It's very true. You have to get it. You have to get it into your physiology. You have to get it into your body.
Yeah, yeah. Wow. You've coached Fortune 500 leaders on executive presence. If leadership itself were a book, what's the most important chapter people often skip over?
Oh, that's a great question. Authenticity. You have to be authentic, because when you're authentic, you realize it's not just about you. It's about your team. It's about the success of, it's about creating a vision and then helping people become strong enough and talented enough to fulfill that vision. And
Yeah,
it's about much more about we-oriented success. And oftentimes, and I certainly saw this in my corporate career, oftentimes you see people sacrifice their authenticity for their own self-gain. And yet invariably that comes up to a wall where they're going to meet resistance, because you can only go so far with that.
yeah. When you say authentic, right? As much as I feel like I understand you, I have absolutely no idea. Can you break down that word for me?
Oh,
What does that
sure.
mean?
Authentic means being true to yourself and being true to others. So it means showing up real, like being a real person, and not being clandestine or surreptitious, or not having devious ulterior motives with people. Is that
Yeah.
helpful?
Yeah, it is. And it's
Okay.
way better than authentic, because that word has been used in so many contexts that now I'm like, okay, authentic. What are we talking about? uh, okay. Thank you so much for breaking that down for me.
Sure.
Uh, for someone who's listening right now who feels stuck in their career, faith, or relationship, what book would you recommend they start with this point? And what's the first step they should take after reading it?
The book I would recommend is Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. That book changed my life. In the first or second chapter of the book, the author asks, "What is the purpose of your life?" And when I read that book, I stopped what I was doing and I wrote a message to myself that said, the purpose of my life is to help people find their purpose in life. And that helped me publish my first book. It got me into Tony Robbins. I became a coach after that. So I would read the book and then I would write a purpose statement about what the purpose of your life is.
Yeah. Oh, thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
What's one? Okay, other than we've talked about your books, and in the course of the conversation, but we never really got to mention the title of the books. What are especially the ones we talk about, the King David and the other ones? What are the titles of the books?
Yeah. So my first book is Whiskey and Yoga, and that's about finding your purpose in life. My second book is called The Lighthouse Keeper, and I'm actually working on turning that into a movie. So I've written a screenplay for that, and I'm working with someone in Hollywood to try and turn that into a movie.
Yeah.
My third book is called Love Letters to the Virgin Mary, The Resurrection of King David. And that's actually, if you see the cover, it's the idea that if you've ever seen the Marvel movies and Thor, it's more about the idea that what if the story of Thor were true and he was banished to Earth by his father and he became human, and as a human he was King David. So there's a connection that I made. And if you look in the Marvel movies, there's actually a connection in the first Thor movie to King David. And then in 2017's Thor Ragnarok, there's a cool, really quick scene where it shows Thor drinking from a chalice like he's receiving the sacrament. So it was really, really impressive. And then the last book, which just came out at the end of May, is Becoming One with Christ, The Lessons of King David. And that's where I look at the promise made to David and the consequences of history as Christianity advanced through Western civilization, also looking at World War I and World War II.
Yeah. Well, and where can listeners find these books and follow more of your work?
So the books are available on Amazon. They're also on my website, davidrichardsauthor.com. I've got 2 new courses that go along with the latest book, Becoming One with Christ, and those are also available on my website.
Oh, thank you so much, David. Thank you so much for the book recommendations and for just breaking down the whole concept of reading, leading, and renewal and faith.
Wisdom, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to speak with you.
Yeah, all the links mentioned, I would add them to the description and the show notes, so listeners can just go directly to the site and mentioned. Thank you so much. That's it for today's episode of the Observe Day podcast. Thank you for spending your time with us as we explore today's observance. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts and share it with a friend who'd love to celebrate life's special days too. Don't forget to join the newsletter at observeday.com/join for more observance stories, tips, and updates. Until next time, keep finding meaning in every day.